can I go over any? Yes.
I have one question about,
Let me just ask, Kathy, was there anything you wanted
Yeah,
to
well,
say about
what I
this
wanted
as
to
the
just
airport
address
liaison?
is that, what we did, the way the process worked is we took the 2013 voluntary, routes, and we distributed those to the two noise subcommittees, the airport planning subcommittees. And what the aviation community had said is that their recommendation was that the helicopters achieve a higher altitude heading west out of the airport because that was an issue. When Jim came to a April 21st meeting of the Noise Advocates Subcommittee, and he presented the draft routes, they also agreed to endorse the status quo and any other changes that they could identify that would be a strict benefit. And obviously, higher altitudes are a strict benefit. So that's what they supported. But also, what came out of those discussions is that when Peter was showing you, for example, November, when they're coming into the airport from the west, as you could see, a great deal of it is over the town of Southampton. And we said, well, why would, we say where those routes should go? We have two members on our subcommittee that are from Southampton. We've also, in the last 6 weeks, appointed town councilwoman Christine Scalera. They've been working with Jeff directly for the November where they get up to town line, and also when you saw from Echo 2 to Echo 3. Again, that's going over Sag Harbor and to Shelter Island. So there's been a great deal of discussion. So it's really been a collaborative effort as far as how these routes are finally netting out. But we're really grateful. I mean, we need to see, the higher altitudes. The nice piece that's being built into this is compliance. Jeff can talk to it, but he's going to be getting a weekly report, if not daily, from Peter saying, okay, and giving him information for those folks that aren't complying, so that, pilots can be reminded what the routes are, what the waypoints are, and what the altitudes they should be at are when they hit those altitudes, when they hit those waypoints.
Okay, Peter, you had...
yeah, I had one question about the Sierra departure route. You mentioned that the helicopters will be instructed to climb north of the airport.
Well, nobody's instructing them. They get these procedures through the helicopter council or maybe...
So I understand it's voluntary, but that's sort of the plan that
Yes.
the agreement is based on. So how do they climb north of the airport?
They
climb within the airport property?
Within the boundary of the airport property, yeah. There's room there.
North end of the...
North of runway 1028, and east of Town Line Road. So they'll take off and head out a little bit along toward the power lines, but then turn around, and they'll basically make a 270-degree turn, I think, and gain altitude. It depends, as Jeff has explained at the council, it depends on the capabilities of the helicopter. If it's not a very powerful helicopter, it might have to go around a couple of times to gain enough altitude to clear the traffic pattern.
Okay.
That's the idea.
Yeah, I just was wondering how far, beyond the runways they would be climbing.
Not far, but I think Jeff's the man to talk
So within the airport property.
Okay.
I just will say that I appreciate that the higher altitude is certainly a benefit within any of the routes, but I think there's a really troubling contradiction with regard to the Echo route. The town, the state, and the county have spent millions of dollars to preserve Northwest, Cedar Point Park, Barcelona Neck. The Nature Conservancy owns Mashamak. There's restricted development all around Northwest Harbor, and we've now created a helicopter superhighway to the Hamptons over what would seem to be an area that we had intended all along to minimize the impact and development and to preserve that natural environment for the benefit of all and the enjoyment of boaters, beachgoers, hikers, et cetera. So I find that a very troubling contradiction.
Other board members?
I had a couple of questions. One, does the tower help at all with altitude? Can they not intervene? Can they talk with the pilots and say, you need to come in
you have to
at
comply to all clearances when Class Delta airspace is in effect, which is when the tower's operating. And the ceiling of that is 2,500 feet. It goes out almost 5 statute miles in a circle. But the tower I think it's more a request process that the helicopter will say, I want to use the Sierra departure, and he'll be cleared to do the Sierra departure. And then the tower will expect him to follow what everyone knows are the procedures. I think Jeff can address this because he's the experienced helicopter pilot, but I don't think you hear a tower telling helicopters what altitude to be at where. They're supposed to know what the procedures are, and when it's agreed they're going to be using it, the tower leaves them to follow those procedures.
And so the tower doesn't correct somebody that's deviating from a route as well?
I think if it resulted in any kind of traffic conflict or situation, the tower would, but that's what their job is, separation. It's not, they have no authority under the law to implement these rules. So I think it's correct to say that they will not say, hey, you know what, you should have been another 500 feet higher by that point. I don't think they do that.
Okay. Do you have percentages, of what routes are used the most? Not the number, but the percentage necessarily?
I think I can get that for you. I don't have that offhand, but I think I can get that for you.
You mentioned that the Sierra route was being used more and more for
Right.
departure, so is that an increase of?
I believe I remember reading and trying to prepare for this that a year or so ago, I think Jim had a memo that said 30% of arrivals and departures were then using Sierra, which was kind of a big improvement in terms of siphoning traffic off the November route. Whether that's still current or not, I don't know, but I'd say so looking at the tracks. I bet it's about 30%, but I'll confirm that.
Yeah, for all the routes, actually. I'd love
Sure.
to know arrivals and departures.
I'll get that.
Thank you. Thank you.
They're broken up traffic-wide in thirds. When we separated 2 years ago, when we actually added the third route, the Echo route, that was one of the keys, was to build up the traffic that was going over the Sierra route or the Georgia Capon route, and the Echo would take a third, and the inbound, because what we were doing was separating in and out over the power lines. So when we separated that, the traffic count was that there was a certain percentage going over Georgia, and the rest was going over the power lines. So when we separated, one of the big pushes was to get more people to go over the Sierra route and the Georgia Capon route, which we achieved. They wanted 50% north and 50% south, but there's a technical problem with the southern part of the airport. Southern part of the airport is where all your airplane traffic is, and the regulations are very specific about where helicopters operate in conjunction with airplane traffic. So if you have airplanes and jets on the south part, you can't put more. The saturation is actually, if they showed the air scene that they have with all of the codes, there's a huge saturation already on the south part, but they only show it in helicopter traffic, which shows it on the north part. But we are not allowed to mix helicopters and airplanes. That's why they come across the airport so high. So to do that and have such a very small section over Georgia, you can't get more than 30-35% over the route, and that's what we did, and we achieved that actually when we actually put the Echo route in place.
Any more questions for me?
I do have a question. Regarding the departures, Echo and Sierra. For Echo, the advice is, when possible, to climb above 2,000 feet within the airport boundary, which is a good thing. But for Sierra, departing south, there's not the same requirement. The language is by climbing above the traffic pattern north of the airport before proceeding south over the center of Georgia Capon at or above 2,000 feet. Sounds to me like the 2,000 feet recommendation is when you get to Georgia Capon as opposed to above the airport.
Actually, I understand how that you could read it that way, but both coming in and coming out, we are very familiar with that we have to be at 2,000. The runway threshold, the 1028 runway, is actually that barrier that you have to be at 2,000 feet. You can't cross the runway coming south because what you're doing, again, is impeding. If you have the regular airplane traffic that are on the south side and that are 1,000 feet, the jet traffic comes in at 500 feet below them, at 15 or above them at 1,500 feet, and the jet. So we would have to be at 2,000 feet just to have our own separation.
So are you saying, in effect, you are at 2,000 feet when you cross the airport boundary?
That's correct. And they do use the northern part of the. In fact, I actually went another part of the training scenarios to make sure that everybody gets it is we actually did flight simulation, and I have right now one of the best movie guys in the business that's going to offer up his camera and his helicopter and come out and actually put all of these in HD, so we can actually put this on our website. So instead of reading the noise abatement program, they're actually going and seeing it. Not only does that work great for the training process for us pilots, but it also works a great deal with the constituents, because you actually get to understand a little bit better, because there's a lot of confusion with the whole climb on the northern part of the airport traffic area, where the airport consists. Like one of the comments was, why are you coming up with the November route when East Hampton Airport, and that's all over, it's all over Southampton? Well, because your airport traffic area is 4.8 miles. So if you went 4.8 miles from the airport, the circle comes over Noyak. So you, as a noise abatement program, have to design that segment of airspace. Even though your town line, the town line road is in the border of East Hampton, your airspace border actually goes probably another 3 miles. So that's why you, as part of your noise abatement program, has the November route in it.
Another question I have is, one of the recommendations from the two airport committees was to increase the height of traffic. So can you more specifically speak to where that has been done in these routes over and above what was done last year?
The routes going out, coming inbound at 3,500 feet at Nassau Point, which is your first checkpoint coming inbound, was 2,500 feet last year.
So that's an increase of, recommendation is an increase of 1,000 feet.
Correct. So the other thing we did was we came into Jessup Neck, and this is what Peter was talking about earlier, was we'd come into Jessup Neck, turn south, come across Noyak Country Club, then turn east along towards the Clay Pit, and then to Long Pond and in. What we did was we cut all of that out. So now that the aircraft have a more stable descent, 3,500, 3,000, 2,500 feet into the airport. We don't control any airspace altitude besides this, because it becomes really pilot control and performance of the aircraft.
Okay, so my question is, with respect to our recommended heights, that's one example. Are there other examples where the recommendation that you're agreeing to has increased the...
The Sierra route, Georgia, we put in the 3,000 feet when able because of weather. The problem with the South Shore is that's also where...
Okay, and that 3,000 is, how is that different from last year?
1,000 feet. It's
Pardon me?
1,000 feet.
1,000 feet
different.
Okay, so those are the two instances where the height has been increased?
Correct.
Okay. And is there any change in the requirement and the recommendation with respect to the number of feet above the airport, within the airport boundary? Has that changed?
Only if the situation arises and it actually comes from traffic flow. If the traffic flow allows, we're going to get our members actually for the Echo route here to climb inside of the traffic area and then start their outbound. Now that totally depends on traffic flow.
Right.
Because if you have your inbound traffic coming in and your outbound going out, you can't cause your your Sierra traffic climbing and descending in the same spot and then having another section climb in the same spot.
Thank you. Question?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Fred.
Jeff, for the total noise consideration for the operation of a helicopter, would you say that the departure and arrivals, rather increase in altitude and decrease of altitude is the noisiest part of the helicopter operation?
Well, definitely.
Cruising
Takeoff
compared
and landings are definitely the most
Right.
noisiest. The best mitigation for noise in a noise abatement program like this are two things. One is altitude by far. To Councilperson Van Soyak's comment about the preserved areas, well, there's actually FAA preserved areas all over the country, and they're depicted on a map, and we know very specifically flyover and flyover. Those altitudes go up to 2,000 feet. The 2,000-foot altitude per the FAA is what they qualify as the can't exact verbiage, but they consider the 2,000-foot threshold and higher as the non-effect or the non-noise effect for wildlife. They're called, any wildlife refuge has that airspace protection over it.
They also say that there is no noise beyond the airport by their noise standards as well, so take that with a grain of salt.
Okay. Well, I'm just telling you the altitude. So The other thing, what we're doing specifically with altitude, well, there's two things. One is altitude by far. The other, when you come up with the noise abatement program, is you come up with, unfortunately, you look at the topography. I can go on Google Maps and I can show you where these routes come from, and it's the topography of the built-up areas. The noise situation in and around an airport is dependent on the constituent and the human element that's living there. And so what, in a noise abatement route, that's what you do. You look for the least built-up areas, and that's where you put your traffic.
So it seems to me that you're making an effort to, the noisiest part of your flight is closest to the airport.
We
Getting
actually,
altitude.
with the noise abatement program that we're doing this year, we actually are coming down into the airspace instead of going through it. So if you think of the airspace as going up to 2,500 feet, which the airspace does, and it's 4.8 miles out, we're actually, if you look at these altitudes, we're coming in and out from the top. And most airports around the National Airspace System come through the sides.
Right. And just another observation, I was looking at the Echo route, unless I have a different map. Echo doesn't go anywhere near Cedar Point Park or the Cedar Point County Park area or Northwest Creek. I don't know if I'm...
Yeah, actually, you can hear those helicopters anywhere within that region. You can be out on the bay at Cedar Point or off Mashomack or
Or on the golf
Northwest
course.
Harbor, clearly at the golf course. You know, anywhere in that whole region.
So it's very brief. I have all the routes except for the November route. I just want to show you, and I'll show you the Echo route because that's where most of the conversation happens. This is actually the Echo route, and this B-Rock, what says BROC, for us that's best rate of climb. Each manufacturer builds the helicopter. They actually put in part of the airport, the pilot training manual of how to best fly their aircraft with noise abatement. And so each one of these dashed lines right here are 800 feet. So our smallest of helicopters can climb at 800 feet per mile. Each one of these segments, are orange or blue, is a mile. So if our less performer will be able to do this. So this is 800, this is 16, this is 24. So most of them should be at the point, at Barcelona Point by 3,000 feet. So the video, and this show you what the pilot will see, but it also show you what you understand as the neighborhoods and how it actually affects and how it looks from the air if it plays. So this is the airport. It's taking off. Maidstone Gun Club is obviously one of our big checkpoints. So every one of the operators, I've talked to all of your 10 biggest users. We've already implemented it in their training programs. And as soon as we're done with this meeting, it gets shot out to everybody, and the program you'll start to see in effect. So right now, he's climbing at best rate of climb. The way to do that is airspeed and weight. So if your airspeed is there's a certain amount of airspeed, it's not going very fast, probably going about 70 knots, but it'll give him the best climb because altitude over airspeed is definitely better. This is the Long Pond area. Town Line Road is definitely a boundary area because the inbounds come here, outbound come here, and it really makes a hot zone right here around Long Pond. He makes the climb, and this is actual Google Maps, so you can see where these areas come up with. So he'll turn, you have the built-up areas here, you have your built-up areas, and we're actually cutting the least amount, as you can see on this Google map, to the Sag Harbor Golf Club. And right here, they're between 1,500 and 2,000 feet. And this is 114. One part of the Echo route that I must mention, your area actually only goes to Barcelona Point. Jim and I discussed this in great detail. We added this other leg that goes to North Haven to the ferry because what would happen is the operators get to this point right here, and then the GPS turns them to the next checkpoint, which means they used to cut right across North Haven. So we took North Haven out and went across the ferry between Shelter Island and North Haven. So right here is the turn at Barcelona Point.
And that's Mashomack Preserve right there.
And right now with the, just for your information, we're working with the FAA
Peter's
so we
fishing
can
right
go
off
out.
that point
That's
there.
right.
Peter, you
That's right. That's how I'm
catching
coming
a
in.
fish there?
Yeah, that's a good spot. Don't give my spots away.
And this is North Haven. So now we have them coming up here and cutting through the water as opposed to cutting across.
Where did they transit from the ferry slip? Where do they go from there?
Currently,
Beyond the ferry
from the ferry, which is right here, they have to go and
Across the
get on the
North
North
Fork?
Shore. They have to go across the North Fork,
Where do they cross the North Fork?
right at the Manatuck Inlet. Hopefully, at August 6th, if the North Shore rule expires, sunsets like it's supposed to, we already have transitions. This doesn't have to do with East Hampton. This has to do with us. We already have the transitions in place that we'll implement for our operators. The singles like this will continue this route, but our heavy twins, the Sikorskis and all that stuff, will actually go around the east side of Shelter Island and then out Plum Gut and go, and then get on the North Shore route.
So they go right over Cedar Point and,
Nope, they're going to go Barcelona Point out to the water to there. They're going to actually hug the east side of Shelter Island.
that's where Cedar Point is.
I thought it was farther.
It's not that wide.
Okay, so
okay.
explain that again, Jeff.
Okay, in the event that the North Shore, because right now we have a mandated rule that everybody has to go to.
Right.
So that's supposed to sunset August 6th of this summer. It's been in 2 years, and we have a huge problem on the North Fork. And when it sunsets, we're going to actually apply 3 transition routes on and off going to Long Island Sound. The heavy twins going outbound are actually going to go on the east side of Shelter Island out towards
And
Plum.
what percentage of the airport traffic are twin?
The information, your top 5 users are the heavy twins.
What percentage of the traffic? Do you have any idea, roughly?
No, because it would probably be close to 50%. And you can't hold me on that because I'm only using data that you guys came up with.
Understood. So
And I must say, it's even though we may not all get along and agree, but it's a breath of fresh air being able to do this the correct way. So for Councilwoman Gonzalez, thank you very much because this transparency and be able, I mean, again, I love sitting up here and somebody listening and not having an agenda. So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Not that we don't have agendas. I think you know what I mean.
So are you saying that the mandatory route is set to sunset? And that's
August
yeah.
6th.
And is that the one that was involved in litigation and all that kind of
Was.
stuff? Is there any effort to renew that or not? What's the story
aware.
with that?
Not that I'm aware, but it is rulemaking action, so we would go through the same process that it did become.
Because that was an FAA mandated
That's
route,
correct.
right? So you,
And what we actually found is the citizens of Norfolk, and I just had this meeting April 30th where they came out in force, is the implementation of first the voluntary route and then the mandatory route for the North Shore actually pummeled the North Shore. It goes over the same spots. Excuse me.
how are you correcting the issues then? Does that also affect that North Shore of Long Island area in western Nassau County?
It'll disperse the traffic.
Okay.
I think with your noise complaints, minus around the airport, because you have to land at the airport,
Yeah.
most of your noise complaints are volume as opposed to single noise events.
Yeah.
So the volume of all the traffic going over one point on the North Fork is what the biggest issue is.
Okay. So you have to explain to me, what I'm having trouble understanding is the expiration of the August 6th rule. Isn't that mandatory route in effect now?
It is. It
Okay.
was, the way the rule was written was for a 2-year period, which would
I got-
automatically sunset on
I
August.
got that. But does that require only that the twins take that route or all helicopter
It
traffic?
there's no distinction between what type of aircraft.
Okay, but they're not using that route now.
Yes, they are.
Yes, they are.
They are.
Yes, they are.
So
They're mandated to use.
So they're flying the east side of Shelter Island out?
No, that would
Okay,
be a
but that's what-
transition. That doesn't apply. The only thing that applies for the North Shore route is the North Shore. It's a quarter mile off the North Shore,
But
all the way to
So
Orient.
what will the Echo route look like once that sunset takes place?
The Echo route will change with the lights going the singles going this way,
The way they're currently going?
and the twins.
So
which
the
are-
heavies, which are 50% of the traffic and the loudest, will now be going the length of Northwest Harbor out
out
the east
towards
side.
Plum Gut and
Gut.
then hitting the Long Island Sound.
Terrific.
other questions for Jeff?
Now, the other thing that is going to be included on the letter of agreement, which isn't in the PowerPoint, is that we're going to remind the pilots, too, that we have a voluntary curfew in place from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. so that they'll get that reminder as well.
And one of the biggest keys that we're going to be implementing this year is what Peter touched on, and is the compliance and the monitoring, especially of these routes. And what will happen is I'll get a report on compliance, both checkpoints, those checkpoints we were discussing, and the altitudes.
And that's going to come from our database?
And it comes from your data. It comes from your airport office. It gets sent to me, and then we will. Because I've already had this conversation with every one of the my members that come out, their management, and they've all agreed that this is doable.
How many pilots are not part of
We have about 98% of the New York tri-state area helicopter operators, and I don't know of one operator that comes to East Hampton that's not a member.
Okay.
Which is important that residents use the plane noise, because that's what's going to keep Peter. He's going to get the complaint. Air scene data takes 24 hours for us to be able to go online to look at it, and then he can, match the complaint data to the track that helicopter took, and then if they're not in compliance, he can relay that to Jeff, and then, they can be spoken to. So it's important that residents use the plane noise.
And Peter, what is your home number?
I don't want to rethink
I wouldn't
that.
They already have mine, so don't worry about it.
This is true.
Okay, I think we're good here, Jeff. I just want to say, I think you and the association's an easy target for someone that wants to, get on this issue of the helicopter noise, which is, it's an important issue. I can tell you, for the town board members, it's a very important issue. And but I just want to thank you for your cooperation and professionalism. We appreciate that as well.
Thank you.
Next time you come, we'll beat you up a little more.
I look forward to it.
All right, thanks.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.